"You're not worth my time," Claire Harrington said, and the whole boardroom laughed like the sentence had been written into the agenda. Ethan Whitaker stood beside the frozen wall display with a screwdriver in one hand and a worn gray tool bag at his feet, the kind of man powerful people noticed only when the lights went out or the Wi-Fi failed. 47 floors above downtown Chicago, the morning sun poured through glass walls and turned the polished table into a river of cold silver. Around it sat 12 directors in tailored suits, 2 corporate attorneys, 3 senior vice presidents, and 1 CEO who had built her reputation on never blinking first. Claire was 34, sharp as winter, beautiful in the way expensive things were beautiful, controlled, distant, untouchable. Ethan was 39, a single father with tired eyes, a faded work badge, and a phone in his pocket buzzing with reminders about his daughter Lily's school recital that evening. He had only been called upstairs because the presentation system had failed 6 minutes before the most important vote in Harrington Global's history. A $4.8 billion merger waited on the screen. Hundreds of jobs waited behind it. And somewhere beneath all that polished language and confident math, a lie waited too. Ethan had seen it by accident. Not because he was looking for trouble. Men like him did not go looking for rooms that did not want them. He was tightening a loose HDMI port when the financial summary flickered back to life, and there it was, a number wearing the wrong name, a debt hidden where no debt should be, a timestamp that did not breathe right. He paused for half a second, just long enough for Victor Langford, the silver-haired chairman of the board, to notice. "Problem, maintenance?" Victor asked, smiling without warmth. Ethan looked at the screen, then at Claire. "Ma'am, that margin can't be real." A soft ripple moved through the room. Someone coughed. Someone whispered, "Is he serious?" Claire turned slowly, her pen still resting above the signature line. She had spent the last 18 months fighting to keep control of her father's company, and she was not about to let a man with cable dust on his sleeves embarrass her in front of people waiting for her to fail. "Excuse me," she said. Ethan kept his voice low. "The operating margin on slide 16 doesn't match the debt schedule beneath it." One of the attorneys gave a short laugh. A vice president leaned back like the entertainment had improved. Victor folded his hands. "Mr. Whitaker, is it? I'm sure the executive team appreciates your concern, but this is a board matter." Ethan nodded once, respectful, steady. "Yes, sir. That's why I mentioned it before she signs." The air shifted, but Claire hardened before anyone could see the fear behind her eyes. "You're here to fix a screen," she said. "Not interpret a merger agreement." Ethan said nothing. That was his habit. Silence had carried him through hospital hallways, overdue bills, school pickup lines, and every small humiliation that came with raising a child alone in a world that measured men by titles. Claire's eyes narrowed. "You're not worth my time." The laughter came easier then, relieved and cruel in the small way important rooms can be cruel. Ethan looked down at the screwdriver in his hand, placed it gently on the table, and for one quiet second the only sound was the hum of the air conditioning above them. Then he lifted his eyes to the CEO and said, "Then don't waste it signing your confession." No one laughed after that. Claire's pen stopped above the page. Victor's smile disappeared by inches. Across the table, the general counsel went pale enough for the morning light to show it. Ethan did not raise his voice. He did not point. He did not ask to be respected. He simply stood there in his work boots, calm as a man who had already paid the full price of being underestimated, and watched the most powerful room in the building freeze around one sentence. 36 hours before that room went silent, Ethan Whitaker was standing in the basement of Harrington Global with a flashlight between his teeth and a ladder trembling slightly beneath his boots. It was 9:42 at night, and most of downtown Chicago had already turned into 1,000 squares of yellow office light floating above dark streets. Up above him, executives were still sending emails with words like leverage, acquisition, and shareholder value. Down below, Ethan was replacing a burned wire in a ceiling panel that nobody important would ever see. That was the strange mercy of basement work. It did not applaud you, but it did not pretend either. Pipes were pipes. Circuits were circuits. If something was broken, it told the truth. Ethan liked that. His gray maintenance shirt was rolled at the sleeves, his tool belt hung heavy at his waist, and the old scar across his left thumb tightened every time he reached for the wire cutters. His phone buzzed on the concrete floor beside the ladder. He climbed down carefully and picked it up, already knowing the message would be from Lily. She had typed, "Daddy, do not forget the blue ribbon for my recital hair." He smiled for the first time all evening. The kind of smile that did not need witnesses. He typed back, "I will not forget. Promise." Then another message appeared. Also, Mrs. Bell says parents should be there by 6:30. Do you think you can make it? Ethan stared at the words longer than he needed to. That was the weight of being a single father. Every promise sounded simple until the rent, the schedule, the overtime, and the world got their hands around it. He wrote, "I will be there." Then he put the phone in his pocket like it was something fragile. The basement door opened, and Marlene from night security leaned in with a paper cup of coffee. "You are still here?" she asked. "System does not fix itself," Ethan said. "Neither do people," Marlene replied, setting the cup on a metal cabinet. She had worked in the building for 22 years and had the tired kindness of someone who had watched too many important people forget the names of the ones who kept their floors clean. Ethan gave her a nod. "Thank you." She looked at him for a moment. "You know, my nephew says you used to be somebody." Ethan reached for his screwdriver. "Everybody used to be somebody in somebody else's story." Marlene tilted her head. "That is not an answer. It is the only one I have got tonight." She left him with the coffee and the hum of the electrical room. Ethan went back to the panel, but his mind had already traveled 12 miles west to a small two-bedroom apartment where Lily would be asleep with a library book open on her chest and crayons scattered across the kitchen table. The apartment was not much. A leaky faucet. A second-hand couch. A refrigerator covered in spelling tests, hand-drawn stars, and one photograph of Lily's mother that Ethan dusted every Sunday. Grace had been gone 3 years, but some absences did not leave. They simply learned the shape of the rooms and stayed quiet. At home, Ethan never talked about the years before maintenance, before overdue medical bills, before he traded tailored suits for steel-toed boots. Lily had once asked why people at work called him just the repair guy. He had been making grilled cheese at the stove when she asked it, her voice small but sharp with the fairness children still believe adults should have. Ethan had flipped the sandwich, watched the butter hiss, and said, "Because sometimes people name you by the only part of you they can use." Lily had frowned. "Does it hurt your feelings?" He had looked at her then, really looked, and softened. "Sometimes." "Then why do you not tell them they are wrong?" Ethan had set the plate in front of her and tied her napkin gently under her chin the way Grace used to do when Lily was little. "Because dignity does not need a microphone." That sentence had stayed in the apartment like a prayer. It followed him through overtime shifts and cold mornings, through elevator rides where executives stopped talking when he stepped in, through lobby conversations where people handed him trash without looking up from their phones. He carried it quietly, not as weakness, but as discipline. Real strength, he had learned, was not making every room admit who you were. Sometimes real strength was knowing who you were when no room cared to ask. That night, just after 11 o'clock, the repair request came from the 47th floor. Boardroom display failure. Urgent. Ethan wiped his hands, gathered his tools, and took the service elevator upward. He did not know that in less than 2 days, the same room that did not know his name would be unable to forget it. By the time Ethan reached the 47th floor that night, Claire Harrington was still in her corner office, though the rest of the executive wing had gone quiet. Her office looked over the Chicago River, where the water moved black and silver beneath the city lights, but Claire was not looking at the view. She was standing barefoot beside her desk, heels abandoned under a chair, reading the same merger summary for the fourth time. Harrington Global had her father's name on the building, but lately it felt less like an inheritance and more like a trial. Every wall was glass. Every smile had a condition. Every hand that clapped for her in public seemed to count her mistakes in private. Victor Langford sat across from her with a folder on his knee and the calm patience of a man who had already decided how tomorrow would end. He was 62, polished, silver-haired, and trusted by everyone who had not learned to fear polite men. "The board is ready," he said. Claire did not look up. "The board is impatient." "That is not the same thing." Victor smiled. "In business, it often is." Claire turned a page. Northbridge Capital wanted the merger closed before the end of the quarter. The public explanation was growth. The private pressure was survival. Harrington Global had lost 2 major contracts, missed revenue targets, and watched its stock fall 14% in 8 weeks. To the world, Claire was the young CEO with the icy stare and the perfect answers. Inside the building, she was a woman standing on a glass floor while older men tapped it with their rings to see if it would crack. "What happens if I ask for another audit?" she said. Victor's smile did not move, but something behind it hardened. "Then the market hears hesitation. Employees panic. Investors punish us. And every person in this company pays for your uncertainty." That was how he spoke when he wanted obedience to sound like responsibility. Claire closed the folder. "Do not put the employees on my conscience." "I am not putting them there," Victor said softly. "You are the chief executive officer. They are already there." The words landed exactly where he aimed them. Claire looked toward the framed photograph on her shelf, her father in a navy suit, one hand resting on her shoulder when she was 16, back when the building still felt like a promise. Her father had taught her to be precise. Never sign what you have not read. Never trust urgency when money is involved. Never confuse a full room with a loyal one. Yet here she was, surrounded by people who called her brilliant while quietly steering her toward a door she had not opened herself. A knock came at the conference room entrance. One of Victor's assistants stepped in. "Maintenance is here for the boardroom display." Victor glanced toward the hall, annoyed by the interruption. "Have him finish quickly." Claire gathered the folders against her chest. "We will review the final deck at 8 in the morning." Victor stood. "And vote at 9. She met his eyes. "If I am satisfied." "You will be," he said, and for the first time that night, it did not sound like encouragement. In the boardroom, Ethan was already kneeling beneath the long table, tracing cables through a nest of polished metal and dustless design. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and expensive coffee. The screen flickered blue, then black, then blue again. He could hear voices through the half-open door, not the words, just the rhythm of pressure dressed as advice. He had heard that rhythm before in another life, in rooms where men said family while meaning payroll, and future while meaning profit. He tightened a connection, restarted the control panel, and watched the merger deck bloom across the wall. Slide after slide appeared in clean corporate colors. Growth projections. Synergy targets. Debt consolidation. Employee retention language so gentle it nearly hid the blade. Ethan did not mean to study it. He only looked because the system was still testing the feed. But then slide 16 flashed, and his fingers stopped moving. A liability line had been renamed under operational reserves. A short-term bridge loan appeared twice, once as debt, once as deferred vendor exposure. It was the kind of trick designed to pass tired eyes and reward confident signatures. Ethan leaned closer. "That is not a mistake," he whispered. The screen went dark again. Behind him, the city hummed beyond the glass, bright and careless. Ethan sat back on his heels, the old part of his mind waking like a light under a closed door. He could have walked away. He had promised himself years ago that he was done saving powerful people from the rooms they built. But then he thought of Lily asking whether telling the truth mattered when nobody listened. He thought of the employees whose faces he saw every night by the elevators, women carrying lunch bags, fathers checking bus schedules, janitors humming softly at 2 o'clock in the morning. So Ethan opened the maintenance log, copied the timestamp, and kept reading. The next afternoon, Ethan brought Lily to Harrington Global because the sitter canceled 20 minutes before his shift. It was not the first time fatherhood had turned a simple workday into a puzzle with missing pieces. He packed her homework folder, 2 peanut butter crackers, a box of colored pencils, and the blue ribbon she needed for the recital, then drove through traffic with one eye on the clock and the other on the gas gauge. Lily sat in the back seat in her yellow sweater, swinging her feet above the floor mat and practicing the first line of her song under her breath. "You do not have to be nervous," Ethan said, glancing at her in the mirror. "I am not nervous," she said. "I am carefully worried." Ethan smiled. "That sounds like nervous with better manners." She smiled back, and for a few seconds the world felt lighter. By 5:18 in the evening, the lobby of Harrington Global was full of people leaving work with tired shoulders and phones pressed to their ears. Ethan signed Lily in at security, promised Marlene she would stay beside him, and took the service elevator down first, then up, because old buildings had rules only maintenance workers understood. Lily loved the service elevator. She said it sounded like a giant breathing in its sleep. Ethan told her to keep her crayons on the small rolling cart while he checked the final cable run for the boardroom system. "Is this where the rich people argue?" she whispered when they reached the 47th floor. "This is where people make decisions," Ethan said. "Sometimes. Those are the same thing." The boardroom was empty, washed in the gold of late sunlight. The long table reflected the skyline like a mirror too clean to trust. Lily sat near the wall with her coloring book while Ethan opened the control cabinet beneath the display. He had come back because slide 16 would not leave his mind. Some problems were wires. Some problems were warnings. He logged into the maintenance console and ran the system test again. The merger deck appeared on the wall, brighter now, each number sharp enough to cut. Lily looked up from her drawing. "Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart. Why does that same number have 2 different names?" Ethan froze with one hand on the keyboard. Children did not know corporate finance, but they knew patterns. They knew when a crayon was called blue on one page and sky on another. He turned slowly toward the display. "Which number?" Lily pointed with the purple pencil. "That one. It is here, and then it is there, but the words are different." Ethan stood, walked closer, and felt the room grow strangely quiet around him. She was right. The bridge loan was duplicated under a softened label, buried deep enough that a tired director might miss it, but plain enough that a child looking without pride could see it. Grace used to say children could find truth because they had not yet learned what they were supposed to ignore. Ethan swallowed. "Good eye, Lil." She beamed for a moment, then frowned. "Is that bad?" He did not answer quickly. He checked the metadata, then the revision history, then the access trail. The file had been altered at 2:13 in the morning using Claire Harrington's executive credentials. But the building access records showed Claire's badge had not entered after 8:06 the previous night. Ethan pulled the security feed index, careful not to open anything beyond his permissions. The corridor outside the executive suite had been flagged for a system reset at 2:12. 1 minute before the edit. 1 minute before a lie put on someone else's name. His phone buzzed. A reminder from Lily's school. "Recital tomorrow, 6:30. Please arrive early." He looked from the phone to the screen, from his daughter to the numbers. And something old and unwelcome stirred inside him. Not ambition. Not ego. Responsibility. Lily slid off her chair and came beside him. "Did I do something wrong?" Ethan immediately knelt to her height. "No. You did something right." "Then why do you look sad?" He brushed a strand of hair from her face and tied the blue ribbon loosely around his wrist so he would not forget it later. Because sometimes telling the truth means walking into a room that already decided you do not belong there. Lily studied him with solemn eyes. Are you going to tell them? Ethan looked back at the glowing screen, at the polished table, at the empty leather chairs waiting for powerful people to sit in them and call a trap a strategy. He thought of dignity. He thought of grace. He thought of every worker whose life could be rearranged by signatures they would never see. Then he closed the file, saved the log, and whispered, "Only if silence would make me part of the lie." By midnight, Ethan had enough to know the problem was not a clerical error, and by 12:37, he knew it was not meant to be found. The access trail looked clean at first glance, almost too clean, the kind of clean that comes from someone wiping a counter and forgetting the smell of bleach. Claire Harrington's credentials had opened the merger deck at 2:13 in the morning, changed 3 labels, duplicated 1 debt instrument, and scheduled an automatic purge of the revision log for 9:01 the next morning. That detail made Ethan sit back in the dim maintenance office and stare at the screen until the hum of the vending machine sounded loud enough to fill the room. The vote was scheduled for 9 o'clock. The purge was scheduled for 9:01. Whoever built the trap did not just want Claire to sign. They wanted the evidence to disappear 1 minute after her signature made the lie belong to her. Ethan printed nothing. He knew better. Paper could vanish, and a man like him could be accused of taking what he had no right to touch. Instead, he took screenshots within the maintenance reporting system, attached them to a harmless service ticket, and saved a backup under the display malfunction record. The truth, he had learned, sometimes survived best when hidden inside ordinary things. At 1:08 in the morning, he called the executive assistant line and left a message asking for 10 minutes with Claire before the board vote. At 7:12, he received the answer from a young assistant named Preston, who spoke with the polished impatience of someone trained to guard important doors. "Mr. Whitaker, Ms. Harrington's schedule is full." Ethan stood in the employee break room, holding a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold. "This concerns the merger deck." "Then send it through finance." "Finance may be involved." Silence. Then a careful breath. "That is a serious thing to imply." "I understand. You are maintenance, correct?" Ethan looked through the break room glass at a line of workers clocking in, faces soft with sleep, lunch bags in hand. "Yes." "Then I recommend you stay within your department." The line clicked dead. Ethan lowered the phone slowly. He did not feel insulted. Insults were easy. What unsettled him was the old familiar machinery of dismissal, the way a warning could be made invisible by the job title of the person carrying it. At 8:04, he tried again in person. The 47th floor smelled of fresh flowers and espresso, as if money itself had a fragrance. Claire walked from her office with Victor at her side, both of them surrounded by attorneys, analysts, and assistants moving like a small weather system. Ethan stepped forward, tool bag in hand, not blocking her, just making himself impossible to ignore. "Ms. Harrington, I need 1 minute." Claire barely slowed. "Not now. It is about the timestamp." Victor turned his head first. "Not much. Just enough." His eyes found Ethan's badge, then Ethan's face, then the tool bag. "The display is functioning, is it not?" "The display is not the issue." Claire stopped then, but not with patience. With pressure. Her jaw was tight, her eyes tired from a night that had clearly given her no rest. "Mr. Whitaker, I have a board vote in less than an hour. That is why I am here." Preston appeared beside her, nervous and eager. "I told him your schedule was full." Victor gave a soft chuckle. Apparently maintenance has discovered corporate governance. A few people smiled because powerful people teach rooms when to smile. Ethan kept his voice calm. "Someone used her credentials after midnight." The smile left Victor's face for a fraction of a second, so small most people would have missed it. Ethan did not. Claire's eyes sharpened. What did you say? Before Ethan could answer, the elevator chimed behind them, and two board members stepped out mid-conversation. The moment broke. Victor placed one gentle hand in the air, not touching Claire, just directing the flow around her. We cannot entertain hallway theories before a transaction of this size. The responsible thing is to proceed, and if there are technical concerns, they can be reviewed after the vote. After the vote. After the signature. After the purge. Ethan looked at Claire, hoping she would hear the difference between urgency and fear. But Claire had spent years proving she could not be rattled by men who wanted her to hesitate, and in that moment she mistook his warning for noise. Send your concern to information technology, she said, and walked toward the boardroom. Ethan stood still as the group passed him, the blue ribbon from Lily's recital still tied around his wrist beneath his cuff. He looked down at it and remembered his daughter's question. Are you going to tell them? At 8:58, through the half-open boardroom door, he saw Claire lift the pen. That was when silence stopped being dignity and started becoming consent. Ethan picked up his tool bag, stepped into the doorway, and chose the cost of telling the truth. The boardroom did not welcome Ethan when he stepped inside. It measured him. 12 faces turned from the polished table, some irritated, some amused, all trained by years of hierarchy to ask the same silent question. Who let him in? Claire stood at the head of the room with the merger packet open before her and the pen still in her hand. Victor sat 3 chairs to her right, posture relaxed, smile restored, as if the interruption were nothing more than a fly tapping against a window. Mr. Whittaker, Claire said, her voice low enough to sound controlled and sharp enough to cut the room in half. This is not the time. Ethan stopped 6 feet from the table. His tool bag hung from one hand. The blue ribbon on his wrist showed beneath his sleeve, bright and small against the gray fabric. No, ma'am, he said. This is exactly the time. A director with red-framed glasses exhaled loudly. Is this about the projector again? Another muttered, security should handle this. Victor lifted one hand, generous and calm. Let the man speak for 10 seconds. Then we can return to business. That was the kind of kindness that expected applause. Ethan looked at the screen, then at Claire. The fraud is not in the merger. A few people shifted. Claire's expression did not change, but her fingers tightened around the pen. Ethan continued, it is in the timestamp. The air conditioning hummed above them. Outside the glass, Chicago moved in morning light, traffic flowing 60 feet below like none of this mattered. Inside, everything had narrowed to one sentence. Claire set the pen down. Explain. Victor's voice came smoothly before Ethan could answer. Claire, this is absurd. She did not look at him. I said explain. Ethan stepped to the control console near the wall display. May I use the screen? The general counsel, a careful woman named Denise Carver, frowned. Do you have authorization? Ethan nodded toward the frozen deck. I have authorization to service the display. The evidence is stored inside the service ticket created for this malfunction. That made Denise sit straighter. Claire gave one small nod. Ethan connected his maintenance tablet, and the screen changed from the merger signature page to a plain system log, ugly, gray, and honest. No colors. No slogans. No polished forecasts. Just time, access, revision, user. Ethan pointed to the first line. At 2:13 yesterday morning, someone used Ms. Harrington's executive credentials to alter the financial appendix. Victor gave a faint laugh. Or Ms. Harrington worked late. Ethan clicked once. Her building badge exited at 8:06 the previous evening. There is no re-entry record. Claire's face went still. Ethan clicked again. At 2:12, the hallway camera outside the executive suite was reset remotely for maintenance diagnostics. I did not request that reset. No one on my team did. Denise leaned forward. Who did? Ethan did not answer immediately. He let the silence do what noise could not. Then he clicked a third time. The request originated from a board-level administrative account. A heavy quiet settled over the table. One of the vice presidents stopped tapping his pen. Claire looked down the row of directors, no longer seeing colleagues, but locked doors with faces. Victor folded his hands. A board-level account is not a person. It could be automated. It could be a vendor. It could be any number of things that a maintenance employee is not qualified to interpret. The insult was clean. Practiced. Ethan accepted it without wearing it. You are right, he said. A board-level account is not a person. Victor's smile returned. Then we agree. No, sir, Ethan said softly. Because the account scheduled the revision log to delete itself at 9:01 this morning. Denise turned sharply toward the screen. 1 minute after the vote. Ethan nodded. 1 minute after Ms. Harrington's signature. Claire slowly pushed the contract away from her. The paper made a small sound against the table, dry and final. Victor's smile finally disappeared. This is theater. Ethan looked at him with quiet eyes. No, Mr. Langford. Theater needs an audience. This only needed her signature. For the first time, no one in the room seemed to remember how to breathe normally. Claire stared at Ethan, and the contempt she had used to protect herself began to crack into something more painful. Recognition. Not of his face. Not yet. But of the grace it took for a man she had dismissed to stand calmly in front of powerful people and save her anyway. Denise Carver was the first one to move. She rose from her chair slowly, not with panic, but with the careful precision of an attorney who had just realized the floor beneath the company was not solid. Freeze the vote, she said. No one argued. Disable document signing authority on the merger packet. Preserve all logs. Notify information security. Victor stood as well, but his calm had begun to look less like confidence and more like paint cracking in sunlight. This is an overreaction to a maintenance log. Claire turned toward him. Sit down, Victor. 3 words. Quiet. Final. The chairman's eyes narrowed, but he sat, and that obedience told the room more than his speeches ever had. Ethan remained near the screen, hands at his sides, looking almost embarrassed to be the center of attention. That was what unsettled Claire most. He was not enjoying this. He was not performing. He looked like a man who had carried a heavy box into the right room and was waiting for someone stronger by title to finally take it. Denise moved beside him and studied the data line by line. Mr. Whitaker, how did you know where to look? Ethan's answer was simple. My daughter noticed the duplicated number first. A few directors looked confused, almost offended that a child had seen what they had missed. Claire did not. She looked at the blue ribbon around his wrist, and something in her expression softened. Your daughter. Lily, he said. 8 years old. She likes patterns. Denise kept reading. This is not ordinary facilities knowledge. Victor cut in before anyone else could speak. Exactly. Which raises the obvious question of why a building technician is conducting unauthorized financial analysis. Ethan did not flinch. Because someone was using a technical system to hide a financial crime. You do not know that. I know enough to stop a signature. The room tightened again. 3 short sentences. No raised voice. No anger. Just truth laid carefully on the table where ego had been sitting. Denise glanced at Ethan, and for the first time her eyes showed something beyond caution. Recognition was beginning, but she had not yet found the name for it. She typed quickly into her laptop, searching internal archives, old vendor files, legacy consulting records. Claire watched her face change before the screen reflected it. Oh my goodness, Denise whispered. Victor's head turned. What? Denise did not answer him. She looked at Ethan. Whitaker. Ethan Whitaker of Whitaker Crisis Analytics. The name moved through the boardroom like a match struck in a dark church. One older director sat forward. Another removed his glasses. Someone near the far end murmured, "The quiet architect." Claire heard it and felt the room tilt. She knew that name. Everyone in her world knew that name, at least those who had been around long enough to remember the recession years, the hospital rescue, the insurance collapse that never happened because one anonymous analyst found a hidden exposure before it swallowed 20,000 jobs. Ethan lowered his eyes for half a second. That was a long time ago. Denise stared at him. You saved Midwestern Mutual from a fraudulent acquisition in 2016. A lot of people did. You wrote the report. A report does not save anyone by itself. Claire stepped closer, her voice much quieter now. Why are you working maintenance in my building? Ethan looked past the glass for a moment, toward the pale morning sky over Chicago. Because 5 years ago, I was in a boardroom in New York trying to save a company that did not know my family existed. My wife called 3 times. I let it go to voicemail because everyone told me the room could not wait. The silence changed. It was no longer legal silence or corporate silence. It became human. Ethan swallowed once, but his voice remained steady. Grace died that night from complications nobody expected. By the time I called back, there was no one left to answer except a nurse. Claire's face lost all its armor. No one looked at their phones. No one shuffled papers. Ethan continued, after that, I stopped wanting rooms like this to know my name. I wanted my daughter to know I came home when I said I would. Victor looked down at the table, not out of respect, but because the room had turned against his kind of power. Claire remembered her own sentence, the one she had thrown at him like he was an inconvenience. Not worth my time. And now she understood the cruelty of it. Not because he was fragile, but because time was the one thing he had already paid for with grief. Ethan picked up his tool bag. You have what you need. Claire reached out, not touching him, only stopping the air between them. Mr. Whitaker. He turned. Her voice trembled once before she steadied it. I am sorry. Ethan held her gaze with a grace that made apology feel heavier than blame. Then use the truth well, Ms. Harrington. Claire did not waste the truth once it was placed in her hands. She turned back to the table, and the woman who had entered that room trying to survive it became the woman her father had raised her to be. Denise, lock every merger file and notify outside counsel. Denise was already typing. Done. Preston, call information security and have them preserve all badge records, camera resets, and administrative access logs from the last 72 hours. Preston nodded so quickly his pen slipped from his hand. Yes, Ms. Harrington. Claire looked at Victor last. And you will remain in this room until counsel arrives. Victor's expression hardened, but his voice stayed smooth. Claire, you are making a mistake that could cost this company billions. She stepped closer to the table, both hands resting on the polished wood. No, Victor. I almost made that mistake when I trusted the people who benefited from my signature more than the man warning me not to use it. No one laughed now. No one even breathed loudly. The room that had measured Ethan by his work boots was now measuring Victor by his silence. Information security arrived within minutes, followed by 2 outside attorneys and the head of compliance, a soft-spoken woman named Angela Reed who carried herself like a locked safe. The logs were mirrored. The access chain was traced. The board-level account led to a delegated authorization key issued through Victor's office 3 weeks earlier. Victor claimed it was routine. Ethan quietly pointed out that routine access did not usually schedule evidence to erase itself 1 minute after a vote. Angela looked at the screen, then at Victor, and closed her folder with a sound that felt like a door shutting. This transaction is suspended pending investigation. Claire exhaled, but it was not relief. Relief would come later, maybe. For now, it was the sound of a person realizing how close she had come to signing away more than money. Ethan stepped back toward the wall, already becoming smaller in the room because that was what humble people did after saving something. They made room for others to stand. Claire noticed. "Please stay," she said. Ethan checked the time on his phone. 5:54, the recital started at 6:30, 12 miles away, and Chicago traffic did not care about justice. "I cannot." Claire blinked. "You cannot?" "My daughter is singing tonight." The sentence landed differently than every financial number in the room. It was not dramatic. It was not strategic. It was simply sacred. Claire looked at the blue ribbon around his wrist, the small bright promise he had carried through the most powerful meeting in the building. "Then go," she said softly. Victor gave a bitter laugh under his breath. "This is ridiculous. We are in the middle of a corporate crisis." Ethan turned toward him, calm as still water. "No, sir. You are. I am in the middle of being a father." That silenced him more completely than any accusation. Claire reached for her coat before she had fully decided to move. Preston looked confused. "Miss Harrington?" She did not look away from Ethan. "Cancel the press call. Move the employee town hall to tomorrow morning. And have my car brought around." Ethan frowned. "You do not need to come." "I know," Claire said. "That is why I should." They rode down in separate elevators, because the building still had rules and appearances and old habits that did not fall in one morning. But in the lobby, when Claire stepped out of the executive elevator and saw Ethan by the security desk tying Lily's blue ribbon into a neat bow with hands steadier than any chairman's, something inside her quieted. Lily stood on her toes, looking up at him with trust so complete it made Claire ache. "Did you fix the big room?" Lily asked. Ethan smiled. "Not alone." Lily glanced past him at Claire. "Is she from the big room?" Claire crouched slightly, careful, respectful, as if approaching something more important than a board vote. "I am. And your dad helped me understand something I should have seen sooner." Lily looked at Ethan. "Was it the numbers?" Ethan laughed softly. "It was the numbers." Claire's driver opened the door outside, but Ethan shook his head. "We will take my truck." It was an old Ford with a cracked dashboard and a booster seat in the back, parked between delivery vans under the gray evening sky. Claire Harrington, chief executive officer of a multi-billion-dollar company, climbed into the passenger seat without complaint. The truck smelled faintly of motor oil, crayons, and peppermint gum. Lily hummed in the back seat, warming up for her song. Ethan drove west into traffic, one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the gearshift, quiet and present. Claire watched the city slide by and realized she had spent years chasing rooms where people applauded power, while the most honorable man she had met was racing to a school auditorium because one little girl believed he would keep his promise. The school auditorium was nothing like the boardroom. Its carpet was worn thin near the aisles, the folding chairs squeaked when parents shifted, and the stage curtains were the kind of red that had faded through years of holiday concerts, talent shows, and children learning courage under cafeteria lights. But to Ethan, it was holy ground. He slipped into the front row with 2 minutes to spare, breathing hard from the rush across town, and Lily looked through the curtain just long enough to see him. Her whole face changed. That was the miracle no balance sheet could record, the quiet grace of keeping one promise in a world full of broken ones. Claire sat 3 seats behind him, not because anyone told her to, but because she suddenly understood that some moments should not be crowded by power. She kept her coat folded on her lap and her phone turned face down. Around her, parents whispered, programs rustled, babies fussed, and somewhere backstage a music teacher gently asked for quiet. Ethan sat still, both hands clasped, eyes fixed on the curtain as if nothing else in the city existed. When Lily walked out with the other children, the blue ribbon shining in her hair, she searched the room once. Ethan lifted his hand. She smiled. Then the piano began. Her voice was small at first, soft enough that the room seemed to lean forward to protect it. Then it steadied. It did not need to be perfect. It only needed to be brave. Ethan's eyes filled, but he did not wipe them away. Claire saw the tears and looked down, not from discomfort, but from respect. She thought of her own father, of the lessons she had polished into ambition and forgotten to keep as tenderness. She thought of Ethan standing in a room that mocked him, not to win, not to shame, but to stop a lie from becoming someone else's burden. When the song ended, applause filled the auditorium. Lily bowed too quickly, then giggled with the child beside her. Ethan stood and clapped like she had just saved the world, and maybe in the only way that mattered to him, she had. Claire did not speak until they reached the hallway afterward, where Lily ran straight into Ethan's arms and he lifted her easily, tool bag, grief, overtime, and all. "You came," Lily whispered. "I promised," Ethan said. Claire stood a few feet away, holding the silence carefully. Lily looked at her. "Did you like the song?" Claire smiled, and for once it was not polished. "Very much." Lily tilted her head. "Did my dad fix your problem?" Claire looked at Ethan. "He helped me tell the truth about it." The next morning, Harrington Global's auditorium was filled with employees from every floor. Maintenance, finance, security, legal, reception. People who usually entered through different doors now stood under the same lights. Victor Langford had resigned pending investigation. The merger was suspended. No layoffs would move forward while the company reviewed the truth. Claire walked to the microphone wearing no armor except honesty. Her voice carried across the room, steady but changed. "Yesterday, I failed to listen because I confused position with wisdom. I dismissed a man because of the uniform he wore, and that man chose to protect this company anyway." Ethan stood near the back wall beside Marlene from security, uncomfortable with every head turning toward him. Claire looked directly at him. "Mr. Whitaker, I owe you a public apology. More than that, I owe you respect." The room went still. Not the cold silence of fear. Not the stunned silence of exposure. This was different. This was the silence that comes when people see dignity standing where pride used to sit. Ethan did not walk to the stage. He did not need to. He simply nodded once. Gentle and restrained. Claire continued, "Every job in this building matters. Every voice may carry truth. And from this day forward, no one in Harrington Global will be treated as invisible because their work happens behind the walls." Applause began softly, then grew, not wild, not theatrical, but real. Ethan looked down at his hands, the hands that had fixed wires, tied ribbons, held grief, and carried grace without asking the world to notice. Later, when the room emptied, Claire found him by the service elevator. "I meant what I said," she told him. Ethan gave a faint smile. "Then make sure it lasts after today." She nodded. "I will." The elevator doors opened. Before stepping inside, Ethan turned back once. "Second chances are not given to prove we were right," he said. "They are given to help us become better." Then he disappeared behind the closing doors, not like a man leaving a victory, but like a father going home. And upstairs, in a boardroom that once laughed at him, no one spoke his name lightly again.